So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thank you to our online audience as well, for those of you watching online on the internet. And my name is Alan Drake. I'm from the Directorate of Communications, and I'm here to moderate the program this evening, which will commence with a few words of welcome, which I'll introduce people in a moment. And then after that, I'll be having a one-to-one discussion on the book that we're here to discuss with the author, Karin Lukas, next to me. And after that, we'll open it up to a panel discussion on the future of social rights in Europe. And at that point, the audience watching online, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat and we will read them out in the Q&A session towards the end of the session. So with that, I think it'd be good to introduce the Austrian Consul General and Deputy Permanent Representative of Austria to the Council of Europe, Alexander Vojda. So Alexander, if you're there and you can hear us, if you'd like to take the floor. Thank you.
Yes, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
All right, excellent. Good afternoon from Strasbourg. It is my distinct pleasure and honor to welcome you to this event. Unfortunately, I cannot be present in the meeting room due to sanitary reasons. However, I'm glad to see that the online connection is working very well. I'm confident that we have many participants to this event from all over Europe, maybe even beyond, whom I want to greet warm-heartedly. Today, social rights are threatened more than ever. There is a need of advocating the rights enshrined in the European Social Charter, whose 60th anniversary we celebrate this year. The promotion and protection of fundamental social and economic rights, the firm priority for Austria. With the ratification of the revised European Social Charter 10 years ago and other pertinent international human rights conventions, Austria has committed itself to a comprehensive human rights protection in this field. An article-by-article commentary on the revised European Social Charter comes very timely. I want to congratulate the author, Dr. Karin Lukas, to this remarkable scientific work. And at the same time want to promote the purchase and use of this important book. Furthermore, I want to congratulate the Ludwig Boltzmann Institute of Fundamental and Human Rights, where Karin Lukas is working. This Vienna-based institute has been the employer of many gifted human rights scholars. I may mention two of them whom I had the privilege to work with in the past. Manfred Nowak, former UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, and Julia Planitzer, currently Vice President of the Council of Europe Group of Experts on Action Against Trafficking in Human Beings. Let me close by wishing all of us an inspiring presentation and debate with gifted personalities. And please let me briefly mention them once more. Karin Lukas, whom I admire for her outstanding work as President of the European Committee of Social Rights. Panos Beglitis, Permanent Representative of Greece to the Council of Europe, former President of the Committee of Ministers, and now dedicated Chair of the Ad Hoc Working Party of the European Social Charter System. Gerhard Ermischer, President of the Council of Europe Conference of INGOs, and if I may add, Austrian by origin. I want to thank Alan Drake, Director of Communication, for the moderation. And finally, I want to give the word back to Alan Drake, but also then to Henrik Christensen, who does an excellent job as Deputy Executive Secretary of the European Committee of Social Rights and Department of the European Social Charter, together with Jan Malinowski and the other members of the team. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Consul General. That's a very good opening for this event. And with no further ado, I'd like to pass the floor to my colleague and neighbour here, Heinrich Christensen, as you say, the Deputy Executive Secretary of the European Committee of Social Rights. So, Heinrich, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alan, and good afternoon. And thank you to Alexander for that kind greeting. Much appreciated. On behalf of the Council of Europe and the Secretariat, I would also like to congratulate Karin Lukas on a major contribution to the academic literature on the European Social Charter. We have to go back several decades to find a work of similar scope and ambition. And so the book certainly fills an important gap, as our friend Professor Okineda also points out on the back cover of the book. The commentary is the fruit of many years of research. I think that's without question. In the acknowledgements, Karin says it was a 3-year project. But I would think that the research, in fact, began much earlier, at least in some form or shape. Perhaps more like 11 years ago when Karin was elected a member of the European Committee of Social Rights. However that may be, it is fitting, I think, that the book is now being published in the year where Karin became president of that committee. It is also fitting that the publication coincides with the Charter's 60th anniversary. Fortunately, the pandemic has not been able to prevent a mushrooming of activities that have paid tribute to this human rights treaty in 2021. Academic conferences, articles, books, social media, and so on. In fact, speaking as someone who was present at both the 40th and the 50th anniversaries, yes, time flies in good company, doesn't it? I can say that I've never seen so much academic activity on the Charter in a single year. And among this year's academic works, Karin's book stands out. As I said, in terms of its scope and ambition, it sets an example for others to follow and build on. And in doing so, it also sets the bar very high in terms of clarity and in terms of a very structured and comprehensive analysis. I hope you will not mind me, and Karin, I hope you don't mind that I take this opportunity to mention that other Charter publications are in the pipeline. The academic network on the Charter has announced an encyclopedic work on the Charter in several volumes to be published shortly. And though not an academic analysis such, I would also, in all modesty, mention the new version of the Council of Europe's own digest of the case law, this time produced in cooperation with the University of Nottingham. We hope this digest will come out in January. As you know, the Council of Europe's Committee of Ministers has recently set up a working party tasked with formulating specific proposals and decisions on how to improve the implementation of social rights in Europe and to reinforce the Charter and its procedures. The proposals on the table stress, among many other things, the importance of disseminating knowledge of the Charter and of the case law of the European Committee of Social Rights, of providing training for legal professionals, of including the Charter in university curricula, and also of academic research. As our experience with the European Convention on Human Rights has shown, such activities are important vectors in ensuring the effective impact of an international human rights treaty. In fact, there is no doubt in my mind that academia has played a significant role in bringing the Convention to the place of impact and visibility where it is today. And we would like to see this happen for the Charter as well. And I think you can all see that it is happening now with books such as Karin's. So thank you, Karin, for taking a very inspiring lead in enriching and renewing the literature on the Charter and for providing a valuable tool for the practitioners out there and certainly also for the practitioners in here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heinrich, for those warm words for Karin. And now I'm going to open a little section where we're going to talk one-to-one with Karin about her book. So the first question that I'm going to ask is an obvious one, especially for a journalist like me, which is, what made you want to write this book, which obviously took a lot of time and a lot of effort on your part? So what was your motivation for that?
I think Henrik is right in a way by saying that probably before that research grant that I got 3 years ago, enabling me to look very deeply into social rights in Europe, already my work in the committee actually was a big motivation to look further into the richness of the European Social Charter, of the elaborate articles that we find there, and also the really very, for decades developed interpretation of the European Committee of Social Rights, where I became a member in 2011. And to my surprise, actually, when I started in that research project, started looking into the literature and the relevant books, there were, of course, quite a number of monographs and articles and so on the European Social Charter, but not an article-by-article commentary on the Charter. And I thought to myself, well, this is something that has to be done, and I have the money and the time to do it, and I will do it. And I had, of course, a lot of support, both with my institute and fellows there and interns, but also with the Charter Secretariat. I remember when Henrik went down into the basement of the Agora building to dig out the drafting history of the 1961 Charter. So we did a lot of unearthing of documents in a way that has not been done before. So there's also, of course, drafting history of the various articles, and then a general part where I look into the specific features of the Charter, the two charters actually, of how they're implemented and what the impact of the European Social Charter actually is.
And who do you think will benefit the most? What kind of groups of professionals is this book aimed at?
I mean, I would hope that given, I try to do both a comprehensive but not too academic and not too elaborate piece. So when people, human rights practitioners or state representatives or interested people of the public want to know more about social rights or anything more specific, they might maybe want to look into this book and read what the standards are and what the committee has been developing under the Charter standards. So something compact but not overwhelming.
And what might seem like a strange question, but why do you think it took so long for a book like this to be written in a way? Because the revised social charter has been around for quite a while. So what do you think accounted for the kind of time lag in this production?
Yeah, I mean, I can only guess. I mean, one reason is, I think, that there are two main treaties in the arena of European, the Council of Europe, the European field, and that is the European Convention on Human Rights and the European Social Charter. And given both the history, also the tradition of maybe favoring civil and political rights over social rights, as well as the two different modes of implementing the convention and the charter, one by a court, which is of course more forceful, one by the European Committee of Social Rights, I think has from the beginning, from the history, led to a bit of a different treatment of social rights vis-a-vis civil and political rights. I mean, when we look back at the Cold War, there was a clear divide between the so-called West and the so-called East, which categories of rights to favor. And this has played out in the implementation of these rights and has continued, I think, since quite a couple of years. Also given various events, like, for example, the economic crisis now, the COVID pandemic, I think social rights have really gathered a lot of attention, and also politicians, those in decision-making power, have realized social rights are really important. They're important to be safeguarded. There are people, we have millions of people in Europe that need these social rights that are enshrined in the European Social Charter. So I think quite a few events have actually led to more attention to social rights. But I think we are pushing against history and also structural developments that have disfavored a bit social rights.
Yes, and I wanted to ask you next, what is particularly interesting and important about the social charter that stands out in the landscape of international treaties in the field of human rights?
Yeah, I think there are several really unique features of the European Social Charter. So if you look at, the old charter, the 1961 charter, already had quite an elaborate set of social rights that could be built upon. My commentary is about the more modern version, the 1961 revised charter, where new rights were introduced, and really this led to a treaty that encompasses basically everything that is important for social consideration and social goals, from the right to housing, the right to employment, a very unique right that you cannot find anywhere else, the right to be protected against poverty and social exclusion, Article 30 of the Charter, and also another one that is also extremely, at the time, was really unique is Article 23 on the rights of elderly persons to social, legal, and economic protection. This is really a very encompassing article of the Charter, really outlining issues that are getting more important day by day, giving also the demographic development of Europe, that a life in dignity for everyone, including when we approach the later decades of our lives, how important it is to be autonomous, to take decisions and get also the help that is needed, I think is more important than ever. And at the moment, we still don't have, on the international level, a convention on the rights of elderly persons. We have in the inter-American system, we have a convention on the rights of elderly persons. So this is also standing out a little bit. And maybe moving from rights and standards to implementation, there is one very unique feature of the Charter, and that is the collective complaint system. Again, something you will not find anywhere else in the world. We know when we engage with human rights, there is the possibility for reporting. So monitoring bodies look at state reports, look at what NGOs and other civil society institutions have to say to these reports, then review them, and then come to a conclusion. This is what takes place in many other systems. And we have individual complaints. So with the European Court of Human Rights and other treaty bodies, individuals can launch complaints. But given that when we talk about social issues, we talk about structural issues, we talk about systemic issues. So rights and problems that concern more than just one person. It concerns a group, it concerns our whole society. So we need to have another mode of looking at specific problems than just through the individual. And that is the collective complaints, where trade unions, employers, organizations, and NGOs have the possibility to launch complaints with the committee of those states that have ratified collective complaints procedure, I must add, because only 16 of the 43 states that have ratified the Charter have actually accepted the collective complaints procedure.
And my next question was going to be, why do you think that, given that the European Convention on Human Rights and the European Charter, Social Charter, are complementary legal treaties, international treaties, why has one got so much more attention than the other, and why do you think that might be?
I think one of the reasons certainly is that the court has different ways of making it heard, of more directly enforceable ways in views of implementation of the convention. Also, of course, different resources, I mean, I'm a lawyer myself. I mean, anything that is more enforceable than something else, court decisions they attract more attention and are also more binding than than the conclusions and the decisions of a committee like ours. But I must say that given that we have the collective complaints procedure, we're actually a quasi-judicial body. So we are comparable to the usual regular human rights monitoring bodies, but with the collective complaints procedure, we have an additional means of looking more deeply into problems and also gathering more support for the solution of the problems than with the new reporting procedure.
And just to follow up on what you were saying earlier about the pandemic, here we are wearing masks and in very strict sanitary conditions. In what way do you think that this terrible global event has in some ways underlined the importance of the social charter and its relevance? Could you give us any more details on examples of how it's shown the European Social Charter to be more relevant?
Yeah, I mean, let me first say that the committee has released 2 statements on the COVID-19 pandemic, where we tried to comprehensively point out what the implications of the pandemic are on first the right to health in Article 11. That was the first statement, and then a second statement on the implication of the pandemic on all the other social rights besides the right to health. And there you can really see how the negative consequences on the right to health of people, as we all know, has also been impacting many other social rights. For example, when I look at the right to education and schools, we see now from quite a few studies, also including many European states, also including Austria, that the negative social effects, the lack of kids engaging with their peers, the social development, the social learning of children is so much impacted because there was distant learning, homeschooling, and these are really things that are difficult to catch up with, because a year for a kid can be almost an eternity. For us, it's maybe not so relevant, but neurologically speaking, there are very different implications. And we see this also. Employment has changed a lot because of the pandemic. People were laid off. People were on, as we call it, short labor, so reduced work, flexible working arrangement at home. Austria is again in lockdown, so everyone has to work at home. So really big changes and implications for social rights that the committee has been looking at and is looking at, because we are now in the monitoring process where we look at the right to health and have been asking states questions how they have been addressing the pandemic and with what impacts, especially on the right to health and also the right to service.
Thank you very much. And I have a couple of questions which, as a non-expert, are interesting for me anyway. And the first one was, I noticed in a lot of places it's a reference to a living instrument in reference to both the European Convention on Human Rights and to the European Social Charter. Would you mind explaining what that means in practice, a living instrument?
Mm-hmm. The living instrument doctrine, you could say, is shared both by the committee and the European Court of Human Rights. It means that the charter is not operating in a vacuum. It's not an instrument on paper. It has to be implemented not only in theory but in practice. And if there are hands-on problems that need to be addressed, the charter standards have to be interpreted and should be interpreted in a way as to being able to address those problems, so that the charter is actually a living instrument, not something that lies around and is old, 61, 96, but something that is actually used for the problems that we have at hand. And also in the book, being inspired by the committee's work, I looked not only at the charter in isolation, because the committee also does that. It looks at the other Council of Europe instruments, at what the court is doing on specific issues, on what the international bodies are doing, and really tries to see what good practice there is and learn from other systems, because we are very much intertwined. The Charter is very much intertwined with the European Union system, with the other Council of Europe instruments, and of course with the issue-specific United Nations documents and monitoring. So also in my book, I try to make with every right a subsection on other relevant international and European standards, very briefly, but just to show where the connections are to the other European and international.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I had a follow-up question was about social partners, who they might be, because I've been reading a lot about the social charter, and it didn't sort of spell out who the social partners might be. So if you have any examples, that would be interesting.
I mean, social partners feature very prominently in the European social charter system. So it's both employers' organizations and employees' organizations, trade unions, and they have a very important role to play as representatives of very important constituencies for the implementation of social rights. For example, I think, as I mentioned already, in the collective complaint system, these two bodies, the employers' organizations and the trade unions, are entitled to bring complaints before the European Committee of Social Rights in view of specific articles that are breached by a state. So they have a very, very important function of both addressing and fighting for the interests and the rights of their constituencies, but they are also in advisory groups, for example, with the Governmental Committee of the Council of Europe. They are representatives of both sides, so to speak. So their involvement is going on in various ways.
Thanks for that. And so returning to the book, just to finish off this section of this evening's event, are there any plans to translate it into any other languages? Because obviously it's a wonderful book, and and quite a few people don't speak English or read English who would be interested in it, in the content. So what do you think would happen in terms of translation versions?
That's a good question. Maybe I should talk to Edward Elgar Publishing about it. I mean, I wanted to do a book that is done in the most accessible language, which is English. So I mean, I could have envisioned maybe to do it in German, as the funding for the research came from Austria. But I mean, this would have really not been the right move. But of course, I mean, translation to French, into Spanish would be fantastic. So I hope that Edward Elgar also, someone listens in, and I will get back to them and ask them what future plans in that arena are.
And perhaps the most important question of this exchange is, how do people get hold of this book, and by what means would you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, there is the possibility on the website of Edward Elgar Publishing to get the book online, and I think that was very nice for those who are here and are following in the room and across the countries. There is actually the possibility to get it at a reduced price with a specific code that I think is going to be put into the chat function. Thank you very much, Tanya Montanari. And so you can just go online, put in the code, and get a special copy for a better price.
Let's hope as many people as possible will do that, especially the people who need it most. And so thank you very much, Karin, for this section of the evening. And we'll progress now to the next section, which is the debate on the future of social rights in Europe. Mm-hmm. So I'd kindly ask our panelists to come forward and take up their positions to my left. So So now we're all here and present. I'll make the introductions of our two distinguished panelists. So to my immediate left, we have Panagiotis Beglitis, who is the Ambassador of Greece to the Council of Europe and chair the ad hoc working group on the reform of social rights in the Council of Europe. So welcome to you, Ambassador. And on the Ambassador's left, we have Gerhard Ermischer, who is the president of the Council of Europe Conference of International Non-Governmental Organizations, and a very warm welcome to you. So perhaps we could kick off this section of the discussion on the future of social rights in Europe by asking the ambassador to give us some opening remarks on how he sees the future in his dual roles as ambassador and the chair of the ad hoc working group.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear friends, dear Alan. Thank you very much. First of all, the Austrian delegation, more particularly the ambassador Gerhard Jandl and his deputy, the Consul General Alexander Voigt, for taking this initiative to organize such an important event for the presentation of the book. It's not only a book, it's much more than a book. As it was presented by Karin Lukas. Also, I would like to express my gratitude, my appreciation to Karin Lukas for her excellent work. I think that Karin Lukas has carried out an extraordinary and amazing work writing this book, this commentary, article by article of the revised social charter. I would say that the pandemic, the sanitary crisis, the pandemic has also its positive aspects, because I imagine that Karin Lukas found the time during the confinement to sit down to write such an important book on the revised social charter. You see that sometimes some negative developments could have also positive consequences, positive aspects. Dear Alan, dear colleagues, you asked me to speak about the future of the social rights. I want to tell you that I'm not a futurologist. Maybe in the United States, this kind of futurologists could tell you which would be the future of the social rights. I'm not the right person to predict the future of social rights. Maybe if I would have been in the ancient Greece, I should have gone to Delphi, seeking its prophecy about the future of social rights. Because for me, the social rights is of course about human rights, but is always a very complicated equation, which has many unknown factors, unknown elements. Because among the main unknown elements for me is which would be the economic situation in the coming years. Today, we were informed about the first negative economic and labor consequences of the new Omicron variant. And some analysts have started speaking about Omicron economics regarding the fragile recovery and also the possible consequences which would damage the labor growth and also the economic growth. I'm sure that you remember that someone in the past was speaking about the economy, saying that it's all economy. Stupid. I would say not stupid. I'm more polite than him, and I would say it's all about economy, dear friends, dear colleagues. But if we don't know, if we cannot foresee, I don't say for the next years, but for the next months, which will be the consequences of the new pandemic crisis, I cannot personally to speak about even on the consequences for the social rights of the current economic situation. Of course, also there are many other factors, unknown factors. As Karin Lukas has spoken about the demographic trends, the rate of unemployment, the political, cultural, social traditions among the member states of the Council of Europe. I would add the role of the trade unions. In my view, the trade unions actually are getting more and more weaker comparing to the forceful presence of the trade unions in 80s, in 90s. Now I could say that the relationship between the capital and the labor is coming against, is running against the labor forces, the trade unions. We have destabilized relationship between the capital and the labor. This is a very, very important development regarding the working class, regarding the social rights for Europe. What else as first as preliminary remarks? Yes. I think, Alan, I'm speaking under the control also of our legal expert, Karin Lukas, has much more legal experience than me regarding the judicial protection of the social rights. I wonder whether, or we should wonder whether we didn't have international conventions for the social rights from the beginning after the end of the Second World War. We have the Charter of the United Nations, only the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations contains some first references regarding the fundamental social rights. But from our side, from the Council of Europe's side, we have firstly the European Convention of Human Rights, which this is a very strange and very interesting point, which does not contain any reference to the protection of social rights. We had to wait in 1961 to adopt the first European Social Charter when the European economy had developed in a very, very impressive way. We're speaking about what the French are saying, les 30 glorieuses, related to a robust economic development, which has been linked to the first social rights as they were enshrined in the first European Social Charter. For many, many member states of the Council of Europe, and outside of the Council of Europe, worldwide, I would say, that we have here a problem with the approach of social rights. For many, as I said, for many states, the social rights are general principles. We cannot speak about enforceable social individual rights, enforceable social rights. Many states have a huge disagreement about the extent or the nature of the state's welfare obligations also. They don't see they don't have the same approach regarding the individual civil and political rights and the social rights. I could say, and excuse me for this exaggeration, for many years after the Second World War, the social rights have constituted the poor stepsister, sorry for the expression, of the civil and the political rights. It's not so easy to speak about the justiciability if the social rights are justiciable comparing to the fundamental civil and political rights. Many problems about the protection of social rights here also in the Council of Europe. I could speak about our work here, the work of the ad hoc working party, GT Chart. I think that we will have the occasion to speak more profoundly about different problems which the member states meet during the negotiations. Thank you. As a preliminary remarks, sorry to be a little bit more extensive, but I'm here to also to answer to your questions. Thank you. Thank you, Alan.
That's great. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Perhaps I could ask now Gerhard to give us his initial opening remarks on this subject from his perspective.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, on a personal note, of course, I had hoped that we would have the Austrian triangle here between Karin, Alexander, and me. Unfortunately, Alexander now is online only with us.
You dream the Austrian-Hungarian Empire.
Yes, I dream the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. And on a personal note as well, being a historian and archaeologist, I have not visited Delphi today and in the last days, but still, I could say what we as the Conference of INGOs and as the voice of civil society inside the Council of Europe expect to do ourselves for the social charter, expect member states to do for and with the social charter, and where we would like to see the social charter to go. To start with ourselves, since April, when we have brought our new rules of procedure into life and had our elections for a new standing committee and board of the conference, we also have created a committee for social rights. And that committee for social rights mainly works with the social charter and with what we shall do with the social charter. So what we like to do is, on one hand, we want to advocate, and we advocate for member states who have not signed and ratified the charter to do so. We advocate for member states who have not signed all the chapters to do so. We advocate of member states who have not signed the additional chapter on the common complaint to do so. Why is that? Because we believe that a charter, a convention, is always as good as it can be implemented. And to implement it, you need to have a mechanism of control. And of course, the common complaint is the perfect mechanism of control. That's why many countries didn't want to join, like the country where I live, Germany. But on the other hand, it means that it weakens the charter and that you don't get the benefit of the charter. And if you do not sign up to all the chapters, it's the same. In the first instance, you may think it solves problems which you don't want to tackle. But these problems are there. They are not there because they're written in the social charter. They are there because they are there in real life. Let's see a chapter which is very fascinating because, as Karin said, it doesn't exist anywhere else, the chapter on housing. And in Germany now we have a huge debate about rents and that people cannot pay rents anymore and that the state needs to introduce maximum rents in the metropolis areas. We have had a plebiscite in Berlin which asks from the government and parliament in Berlin to nationalize the big companies owning houses and apartments. It's a huge debate. If Germany would have signed the chapter in the social charter and would implement it and take it serious, we would not need that debate because we would have a legal instrument to tell us what to do and that we have to care for housing for everybody in the state. The other part is that the Council of Europe has so many wonderful conventions. And these conventions, they complement each other. Some of them are very old instruments, like the Social Charter, 60 years old. And I mean, even the revised Social Charter is now nearly 30 years old. Other conventions are much younger. And therefore, they tackle problems which the old conventions never could foresee. The problem we have is that each of these conventions is put into its own box. If you could take those conventions out of the boxes and use the series of conventions as a toolbox, that would be wonderful. As civil society, we do that. We look at all the different conventions and see how they interact, and we try to use them as a toolbox. But on the administrative level, on the level of the states, but even the level of the Council of Europe, they are put in the boxes of different ministries or directorates, and they are separate entities which do not come together. But if they would come together, there would be so much added value. For good reasons, this year, for the first time, when the conference of INGOs celebrated, as every year, the day for the eradication of poverty, it was done together with the question of poverty and the question of trafficking. And if we look at the Social Charter and the Charter Against Trafficking, they are complementary. And if we look at them together, we can get so much more out of it. And I see it in our own committees. We have a committee on the right of the child. We have a committee on equality. We have a committee on migration. Each of these committees is working with the Social Charter, with specific chapters of the Social Charter. But each of them is taking something out of the Social Charter. But if we bring it together in the work of these committees with other conventions of the Council of Europe and put it into that bigger context, these things get suddenly so much more than just the lines in the Social Charter have been in the beginning. So that's what I envisage. It may be a utopia more than what the future will bring. But if we could manage to do that, then that would be great. And we also want to make our own INGOs better aware and better able to commit to the process of the common complaint, at least where it is possible. And in that, we will come together with you. And hopefully next year, we'll have a training course where we can enable our own NGOs to do that in a better way. And then maybe we can go from our own international NGOs in the conference to the grassroots level organizations in the countries and repeat that experience, hopefully in different languages, so it's easier for people on the grassroots to follow. So that's in a nutshell what my vision is from the side of the civil society for the Social Charter.
Before I would like to just ask Karin for her comeback and input on those two interventions. I just wanted to say, coincidentally, today on the website of the Council of Europe, we published a news story about a study which emphasizes the synergies of the Istanbul Convention and the Budapest Convention on cybercrime for tackling the issue of violence against women. So that might be a trend that Gerhard has identified there about different treaties and instruments of the Council of Europe coming together and being combined. So, Karin, would you like to sort of offer any remarks on those two introductory remarks by our fellow panelists?
One remark to Ambassador Beglitis. You rightly pointed out that not looking at the future, but looking at back into history, that historically social rights in Europe and were seen, and are still to some extent, but this is changing, seen as social goals, aspirations that have no enforceability in law and are not justiciable. And it's true that other countries, other continents were much more ahead of Europe in that regard. So we had constitutions in India and South Africa, etc., enshrining social rights and also making extremely interesting, far-reaching judgments on, for example, the right to housing, the right to social security, when we in Europe were still debating, well, is this a right or is it rather a social goal, and how can we do this? So it's true that we have had and have some catching up to do. The fact, however, is also that in many European jurisdictions, social rights and civil and political rights are in one constitution, and this is actually what social rights are about. We think them together. For example, when we look at children's rights, there are a lot of social rights involved in advancing the rights of children, but also, of course, civil and political. So it's really a pattern. It's intertwined, the social aspect and the civil and political aspect. And to Gerd Emmischer, I fully agree that we, as monitoring body and also the Council of Europe institutions, need to work closer together, because there are a lot of cross-cutting issues where the social charter is relevant, where the Convention Against Trafficking is relevant, children's rights, Grevio, and so on, you name it. And Miriam Kuhlmann, my fellow colleague in the committee, is also in the room. She is actually engaged in the drafting process of Greta on how to draft a recommendation on trafficking for the purposes of labor exploitation. And here we have very clear and direct linkages between human trafficking and the social consequences and the social aspects of that for that specific purpose of labor exploitation. So it's already starting, but I think the Council of Europe institutions and treaties would have much more impact if this silo thinking, that of course is much more convenient and much doesn't need as many resources and thinking, was continued. But we should really get away from that, because we have so many new challenges, and really looking into the future, we have the pandemic with consequences that still we are not clear about the sheer extent of it. Where we have to think about the rights of younger people, how in this highly flexibilized, precarious, deformalized setting, sometimes they can still advance in a way that is fair, while also, of course, taking on board the positive aspects of digitalization and automatization. And we have the huge challenge of the climate crisis. And here I really very much appreciated the proposal of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe that proposed a right to clean, sustainable environment, and proposed to anchor such a right both with the European Convention and the European Social Charter, to really enable us to go beyond rhetorics, political commitments without real implementation, really have the instruments used to advance right to clean environment, for example.
Thank you very much, Karin, for that feedback. And perhaps I could ask the ambassador to intervene again, this time on perhaps explaining the work of the working group, and how that is perhaps how within the working group they envisage the future development of social rights.
Thank you very much, Alan. May I make a comment on what it was said by Karin, and after I will respond. Karin spoke about the constitutionalization of some social rights. This is a very important issue in my view, but we should at the same time take into account that all the member states are not coming from the same historical, cultural, economic, social, political traditions. I would like to give you an example, the example of my country, Greece. After the fall of the dictatorship, we adopted a very, very progressive new democratic constitution, where for the first time we incorporated some of the fundamental social rights. After many years, because of the subprime crisis in 2008, the government, the country was on the brink of the failure, and the government of this period was obliged due to austerity measures imposed from the European Union, and the European Central Bank was obliged, and I was member of this government, dear Alan, to cut the salaries, the pensions, to restrict the social rights. We were obliged. We were in a very difficult position, and we wanted to avoid the huge social crisis which could be produced by this economic crisis. But at the same time, our constitution protected the social rights. This is a huge political, philosophical, intellectual, ideological contradiction. This is also a problem. It's very, very important to make approaches from a legal point of view. But from a political point of view, it's very difficult to speak the same language with our friends, the legal advisors. I fully support personally, ideologically, what Karin has said, but it's very difficult to maintain the same level of protection when a country is under a huge economic and social pressure. This is a very important issue for all of us. Now, regarding this ad hoc working party, named Jeté Charte in French, it is an honor for me that the Committee of Délégués, in its decision on 7th October, entrusts me the presidency of this working group with a clear mandate, which is divided in two phases. First phase, until the ministerial meeting in May under the Italian presidency, we have to discuss all the practical ways with a view to improving the functioning of the reporting procedure, while at the same time we want to diminish the burden of all this reporting procedure on the member states. The second task for this first phase is to improve the follow-up by the Governmental Committee and the Committee of Ministers to the conclusions prepared by Karin, by the members of the European Committee of Social Rights, on the basis of the reports submitted by the member states. Maybe for some people it sounds a little bit Chinese. It's a technocratic language, but in my view, it's profoundly political task. And the third one is about the improvement of the procedure of collective complaints. We have already started discussing within this working group with participation of national experts, and also inviting the representatives of the institutional bodies, including Karin and other friends from the CDDH, from the Governmental Committee. We are at the beginning, Alan, of our collective exercise. We have already received some interesting ideas, the proposals, which I think could contribute to examining the most appropriate, the most effective practical ways to improve the whole procedure. I would like to share with you, dear colleagues, my personal opinion regarding all these procedures. I don't know if you will agree with me, if Karin also will agree with me, but for many years we have constructed a very heavy structure here with a view to protecting the social rights. We are obliged now to work to the direction of improving the whole functioning and at the same time protecting the social rights. It's not so easy to transform, to translate in practical ways our tasks, our mandate, but with the assistance of our experts from the capitals, with the participation of the representatives of institutional bodies, I'm quite optimistic about our mission. The second phase of this working group is related to more general and more substantive issues, which, in my view, would be the most difficult phase of our exercise. But for the time being, we have to focus on more concrete proposals in order to fulfill our mandate. And after the ministerial meeting, we have a lot of work on the second major mission of our working group. I would like to please my colleagues to think collectively how to work, how to improve this exercise. I don't know if Karin agrees with me, but the current situation, the current functioning is not sustainable for the future, for the protection of social rights in the future, when we'll have to address many new challenges, economic, social challenges, when we have to deal with new social rights, new generation of social rights, when we have to discuss about the consequences of the transition to Greek economy, to digital economy, when we have to discuss about the consequences of the implementation of artificial intelligence tools, when we have to discuss about the social rights of the workers who are working in the digital platforms. It's a completely new reality, dear colleagues, for me. Having or maintaining this structure, it will not be possible to protect the social rights. We share, all of us, the same social sensibilities, the same social values. But to be more practical, more realistic, we have to think about how to become more practical, more efficient, more effective, more realistic about the protection of social rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I'd like to bring in Gerhard in a minute, but I think that it's probably fair that I give Karin a chance to come back on some of those remarks on the enforcement or the implementation of social rights raised by the Ambassador. So, Karin.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alan. Yeah, I mean, as a committee, we of course welcome very much the goal of making the implementation of social rights more forceful. And this is actually the goal of this reform process, that social rights are implemented in a better way. And this is, I think, a goal that we all share. The the golden question is how do we get there? And this is also linked to the second goal of states wanting to reduce their workload and their reporting burden. So I think in terms of future challenges, the committee is already in the process of discussing impacts of platform economy, gig economy, flexibilization of work, the right to disconnect, and so on. So I think the charter itself and the charter standards, they are broad enough and also foreseeing enough so that we can integrate future challenges. But it's true that the charter, given its broadness, also has led to a lot of detail in reporting. So in terms of being more targeted and being more concise and really looking at what's important for us to know and for the states to report, I think there needs to be a common effort to improve. And the committee has started with in the last couple of years by asking specific questions of actual importance of problems that are happening now. For example, we have been asking states about pandemic measures and try to be here more, to prioritize more what is important. But I think here there needs to be, I guess, a certain creativity to find solutions to really make more forceful this implementation, while, if possible, reduce everyone's workload, because also the committee's work is getting more, the secretariat's work that supports the committee is getting more, and the resources are not getting more. So this is something for sure to be addressed. There is more attention to the charter, which is great. More states are ratifying more rights, accepting the collective complaints procedure. Spain just this year. That means more work for us, and this will entail either prioritization and or resources that match this effort.
Much, Karin. I'd like to just bring in Gerhard now. I know you said you hadn't been to Delphi, but I would like to sort of draw on your prophecy powers, just to ask you, you're in touch with, through your members of the conference, with the grassroots and the civil society of Europe. What trends in Europe, social and economic trends, do you think will impact the most on the development of social rights? Is it an aging population? Is it the precarity of work for young people? Could you kind of give us some pointers to what you think the future trends will be because of those big trends?
Well, I mean, you mentioned a number of them already. I mean, the age situation, of course. And I mean, again, this is quite fascinating because the social charter in an early stage has implemented the rights of the aging people to age in dignity and be protected from poverty, for example. The actual pandemic crisis, of course, is a huge challenge, and we all do not know what that challenge will entail because the crisis is still ongoing. And a lot of what the crisis has caused is still not visible. In many ways, we only see the tip of the iceberg. When I think about education, when I think about children, small children, the lack of social contact, the problems we have with children who have psychological problems due to the crisis. In countries like Austria and Germany, we have reports that the number of children who need specific clinical care on that issues has doubled. But the children which are brought forward, they are all from wealthy families, from good backgrounds. The huge mass of children who live in more precarious situations, we don't see because their parents might not care, they might not know where to go. They are not in the schools. So the normal social networks don't work. So the consequences of that we even cannot foresee in the moment, but they will be much bigger than we we expect, I guess. So it's for me, it's again, it's absolutely mandatory that we take the social charter and the social rights serious. And taking them serious also means that we see them as what they are. They are human rights, and they are deeply rooted in the human rights, and they are inseparable of human rights, and they have to be covered by the same universality like human rights. And in that aspect, I found it quite thrilling that in October, when I was in Vienna for the Fundamental Rights Agency Forum, the FRA very, very clearly declared that it had a double mandate, the mandate on human rights and social rights, and that it didn't see it as two packages, but only as one package, which was actually a human rights package. And that is a new development. And I'm not sure what caused that new development. Was it a lesson learned from Greece and from the financial crisis? Possibly. Is it simply a reaction of what they see happening in the pandemic crisis? Also possible. But the really important point is that we see that development, that an institution like the EU, which is so much grounded in the economic field and not really in human rights and social rights, is, at least in its Fundamental Rights Agency, very clearly heading into a direction which sees social rights as part of the fundamental human rights and something which has to be cared for on that level, on this highest possible level. And most definitely the challenges we have in the future, they will need that kind of instruments. And if we talk about Europe, and Europe not just of the European Union, but the Europe of the Council of Europe, it's 47 member states, and the enormous differences we see in these 47 member states in their democratic development, in their respect for human rights, in their economic power, in their social status for people inside the countries, we see also that one of the biggest challenges is this difference. And if we go outside Europe and we look at the difference we have between Europe and between, let's say, Africa or parts of Asia, and the results of the migration streams which come to Europe because of that, because there is this enormous difference in the level, and it's like with gravity, it's going from one to the other. We have to tackle these challenges. And how shall we tackle these challenges if we do not take social rights serious, if we do not enshrine them in the national laws, in the constitutions, but most of all, if we don't use the international law instruments which we already have. And the social charter, of course, is, again, I would quote the Secretary General on the Istanbul Convention in that case, it's the gold standard we have as the Council of Europe. And we need to make use of that.
Thank you very much, Hart, and I'd just like to pick on upon one of the things you said about Africa, because it seems to me that if we look into the future, which is the point of this discussion, we can see some interconnectedness between social rights in Europe and social rights in Africa, in the sense that when we take the pandemic, we keep having these variants because the rest of the world is not vaccinated as well as Europe, for example. So the right to health of European citizens in some way depends on the right to health of global citizens outside Europe. And then we have the issue of climate change, which might provoke massive, much bigger migrations from Africa and other places which are hit by drought. Do you foresee in the future, I know it's sort of almost fantasy, but do you think that there might be a need to look at this kind of interconnectedness between European social rights and the rights of people less fortunate in other parts of the world for the reasons I mentioned, because they impact on European citizens directly?
I mean, we live all on one planet, and we are all citizens of the earth. And although we have, of course, our European systems, and each country and each continent has different systems of looking at human rights and implementing them, the huge challenges of today, pandemic, the pandemic crisis will continue, and more pandemics are supposedly coming. So if we listen to what a number of virologists, it's not improbable that there will be more pandemics, and the same with the climate crisis. These are global challenges, and if you keep on compartmentalizing those issues and putting them into the national box or into the European box, the solution this will not be a solution. And here the issue of solidarity is a big issue. And here I really see in Europe, also when I look at the discussion in my country, Austria, on how we should together as a society tackle the pandemic and the vaccinations and to preserve the society's right to health, there are huge discussions of unsolidarity. And that worries me, that we've really become very divided on an issue that should actually unify us. And this is something that will not get us anywhere in tackling these challenges.
Yeah, a bit worrying that. So anyway, thank you, Karin. I think at this point it will be good to open up to questions from both online and in the room. So I'd like to start first of all inside the room and ask if anyone has any questions. If you do, please say who you are, and also if you have a preference about who you would like to answer the question, you should specify it. So and obviously use your microphone, otherwise the people at home won't be able to hear what you're saying, and neither might we not. So is there anyone here who would like to put a question to the panel? Yes, go ahead.
I can start. My name is Miriam Kuhlmann. I'm a member of the European Committee of Social Rights, so a colleague of Karin, and of course very much interested in securing social rights conventions, actually, but also what Gerhard Ermischer was promoting, like we need to look further, we need to look more through the complex structures, basically. But what I'm actually interested in, and I think the ambassador touched upon, is the collective dimension of the social charter. We've heard that the social rights are being threatened for many years. Neoliberal ideas have been amongst us since the 70s, very progressively, actually, with deregulatory strategies and so on, with decline of trade union membership. And along with that kind of development, we also see a decline of the protection of workers. But these are the weaker parties in a work relationship, basically. So they are very much dependent on representatives, whoever they are, however we call them, to come up for them as a group, And nowadays we see a lot of new forms of work coming up, like platform work we were discussing today in our plenary. And I was wondering, what's your vision? So what can trade unions actually do to mobilize the European Social Charter at national level, or even through our collective complaints procedure, as far as the member state, of course, has signed the respective provisions? But how can we as a committee, how can you or we do something to promote these collective rights actually we have in the Charter? And how can we protect new forms of work and the workers doing this kind of work? I would be interested in hearing your vision on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the tricky question, Miriam. What is really appealing about employment rights, also as enshrined in the Charter, is that they have both an individual and a collective dimension. So very, very important rights, such as the right to strike, right to collective bargaining, is impossible on an individual level, and it takes indeed this collective effort of trade unions and employers' organizations working out the terms and agreements of fair working conditions. But it's true that in the course of time there was an erosion of that bargaining power of trade unions to some extent, also because not only of deregulation, certain neoliberal tendencies, but also because of globalization and the easiness of transgressing borders, and we still had national trade unions and national employers organizations trying to deal with the problems at hand. Since quite some time, I mean, it would have been nice to have someone from the trade union side as well here now to answer this or to take a position. But I think many trade unions have been starting to cooperate on a transnational level, cross-national level, and in order to find regain some of that bargaining power that is needed for transversal problems. That's the one thing. And the other thing is that we as a committee, and I come back to the living instrument doctrine, we as a committee have to look at the actual problems that arise because of this globalized situation and this erosion of certain powers of constituencies, and be aware in our interpretation of the Charter standards where there are connections of these problems with the Charter standards and means of protection. And we also need this input and feedback from the trade unions, from the employers' associations, from the NGOs that bring actual complaints and say, well, these are the problems that we are facing. And we think these Charter standards are violated. And what does the committee say to that? Because what is really the chance, the opportunity of the collective complaints procedure is exactly this collective addressing of issues where also the state can then, a bit like an early warning mechanism, react to structural issues in a much better way than in receiving individual complaints and addressing individual issues. So I think we need very much this feedback and this activity of civil society in order to make relevant decisions on those issues.
Perhaps I could ask, yes, you have a question, please.
I do. Thank you for the fantastic introduction, but also for the fantastic interventions thus far. My name's Aoife Nolan. I'm Vice President of the European Committee of Social Rights. And of course, you know, we've talked and we've heard a little bit from Ambassador Beglaitis about the changes that are potentially going to, well, the process that GT Charte is involved in at the moment. And I would be very interested, given that we're thinking about the future of social rights and the structures and the way in which also the European and Social Charter is applied in practice, both externally but also within the Council of Europe, I would be interested to hear from all the speakers their views on the role of the Governmental Committee in the context of the future of social rights, for instance, if there are thoughts around that. It may be that that's off topic for Karin, given it's a commentary, but I'd be quite curious hearing from others, perhaps.
Okay, so does it make sense to start with Karin, or shall I start with Erhard, maybe? Okay, Erhard, would you like to go first?
On the Government Committee, it's difficult for me as the voice of civil society to answer that. I could only say what we would expect from the Committee of Ministers, and that of course is that we would expect them to support and to very clearly make decisions which reflect back to the member states the importance of the social charter, of the chapters which are enshrined there and the values which are enshrined there, and that it has to be taken serious, and that infringements have consequences, as we do in other cases, in human rights cases and cases of the Court of Human Rights. But that's the only thing which I can say, that we hope that they will do that, and that we will at least raise our voice if they don't.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
What to say, dear Alan? It's a difficult question. What I would like to wait for the civil society, the trade unions, the European Committee of Social Rights during this period of negotiations. I would like to ask you to be more realistic. Allow me to say, or to invite you to be, all of us, more realistic. I cannot foresee what will happen in the coming months. Really, believe me. Because, please, I want to invite you to come back some months ago, when we had to face with the first, the second wave of the sanitary crisis, and in our countries, the enterprises were obliged to dismiss employees to avoid the closing down, to restrict the rights of the workers in order to avoid the closing down. We were in a very difficult situation. What to predict about the coming months? How the whole situation would evaluate during the next months. It's very difficult. You are from your side, and you are doing very rightly to support the social rights. But if you will come in the position of a minister of a government, which will be obliged to maintain with very tough measures, let's say the social cohesion under such a difficult situation, what to do? Please don't see all the questions only from a legal point of view. In political terms, what to do? What to do a government here in France, in Germany, where the governments were obliged to close down or to finance the partial employment, which is also against the right for full employment, against the more fundamental social rights. What to do? Hopefully, we had to change the rules of the Stability Pact, even for some period, in order to finance this difficult situation, which was not the case during the economic crisis in Greece or in the other Mediterranean countries in 2008, 2009. Now we have the possibility the money is flying now. The helicopter money is falling down in a massive way. It was not the case during the first period of crisis. So in order to protect, to maintain, in some extent, the social rights, to maintain the enterprises open, to maintain the working places, the employment. That's a reality. Okay, I know very well. I fully share with you what you have said. But in real terms, what to do tomorrow, after tomorrow? Thank you.
May I just clarify that my question's about the governmental committee, not governmental responses, just in case I wasn't clear. That's very helpful, but I just want to make sure that my question is clear before Karin tackles it. Thank you.
Maybe to just mention that the governmental committee of the Council of Europe is the more technical committee of from the state sides, also including social partners, and prepares in the follow-up of the committee's decisions and conclusions should support a more forceful follow-up of the committee's conclusions and decisions. And then the political decisions are taken by the Committee of Ministers. So, and we will of course discuss in the working party that you chair, Ambassador. We will discuss this follow-up to conclusions and decisions of the committee, and how to make the implementation more forceful and more direct. And here, the governmental committee has a role to play. Should maybe play a better role. And we are in constant exchange, the governmental committee and the European Committee of Social Rights, and how to support this follow-up to conclusions and decisions. So yeah, we will see. Aoife.
Very much. much, Karin. Does anyone else have a question? We have one over here from this gentleman. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Giuseppe Palmisano. I'm a member of the European Committee of Social Rights, currently General Rapporteur and former President. Well, I have three questions, but if possible, to have an answer very synthetic and clear on this, to all of you, in particular to Ambassador Beglidis. Do you think that the protection of social rights at European level needs to be strengthened and enhanced? This is the first question. If the answer is yes, do you think that this can be achieved through the strengthening and updating maybe of the European Social Charter system? If the answer is yes, what do you think is necessary to do in order to strengthen and update this system? Thank you.
Professor, your questions are very easy to answer to them. Yes, I do. For the three questions. Yes, I do. You don't have, and no one has the monopoly of the social accessibility, of the social responsibility. Me also. As ambassador now, as minister yesterday, we have the same concerns about the protection of social rights. But when the situation is so difficult, when the economic situation risks to weaken much more the social rights, we should focus firstly on the economic situation, and if we can, at the same time, to protect in the most effective way the social rights. It's not so easy. It's easy, very easy theoretically to speak about the protection of social rights. Yes, I do. I'm much more in favor of the social rights, politically, philosophically, ideologically, intellectually. But how to protect them? This is the main question, how to protect. By the Charter, yes. But not only by the Charter. But we have the Charter, but the Charter was not able to protect the social rights during the economic crisis. How to overcome this contradiction? This is some very simple questions to deal with. Fully agree with you. I think that I didn't give the impression that I'm against the social rights. No, not at all, dear professor, not at all. But I'm looking for how to the social rights become more efficient, more effective, take into account the current economic situation. This is the most important question now. But I fully agree with you. But the problem, the political question, the political problem is how. Thank you.
Very much, Ambassador. And you had a question, sir.
Merci beaucoup. Léopold de Stefanini, je suis adjoint à la représentation permanente de la France auprès du Conseil de l'Europe. And if you allow me, I will just introduce the topic in French and then maybe try a short translation, but my English is not as fluent as my French. Deux petites questions, si vous me le permettez. Tout d'abord, peut-être remercier vraiment très chaleureusement Madame Lukas pour cette présentation et pour ce livre, parce que je pense que c'est évidemment extrêmement important d'avoir ce genre de travail académique. Je comprends qu'il n'y en avait pas eu depuis de longues années. Et il faut vraiment que cet instrument, la Charte sociale européenne, bénéficie de la lumière des travaux des chercheurs, qu'on en parle, qu'on communique autour de ce sujet. Donc encore une fois, cet exercice est extrêmement bienvenu. Et moi-même qui suis diplomate et non expert en droit social, j'apprends beaucoup grâce à ce genre de publication. Donc, merci beaucoup. Ma première question porterait peut-être sur la nécessité d'une convergence sociale à l'échelle pan-européenne. Je voulais savoir si, de votre point de vue, le système de la charte sociale tel qu'il fonctionne actuellement permet cette convergence. On a parfois le sentiment, quand on est à l'intérieur de la machine, que finalement les États qui adhèrent au protocole établissant un système de réclamation collective, qui produisent des rapports de qualité à échéance régulière sur l'ensemble des dispositions qu'ils ont reconnues, puisque c'est un système à la carte, finalement sont ceux qui vont accélérer le plus vite vers les meilleurs standards européens, et qu'inversement les pays qui rencontrent de grandes difficultés et qui eux-mêmes ne reconnaissent pas beaucoup de dispositions et surtout pas le protocole sont un peu laissés en arrière, ce qui quelque part est contradictoire avec cet objectif de convergence sociale que évidemment nous avons intérêt à encourager et que nous encouragerons, nous, France, à la fois à l'échelle communautaire lors des 6 prochains mois, puisqu'il y a plusieurs initiatives sur le plan social dans le cadre de la présidence française de l'Union européenne, sur le salaire minimum, sur les travailleurs des plateformes, et évidemment dans le contexte pan-européen ici au Conseil de l'Europe. Et la deuxième question, vraiment une question de béotien, parce que je ne maîtrise pas vraiment tous les mécanismes encore de protection des droits humains. On a beaucoup dit lors de ce panel que les droits sociaux étaient des droits de l'homme à part entière, cette notion d'indivisibilité des droits de l'homme. Et je voulais savoir si une figure comme la commissaire européenne aux droits de l'homme, qui est une figure relativement récente dans l'organisation, créée il y a environ une vingtaine d'années, était susceptible de jouer un rôle accru face à des violations manifestes, récurrentes ou urgentes constatées par le Comité européen des droits sociaux, puis par le comité gouvernemental en cas de non-conformité ou de violation manifeste. Merci beaucoup.
Well, thank you very much for your kind words on the book. That is a good compensation for all the sweat and hours I put into it. Your question first on the social convergence. I mean, given that we have this very specific situation of the charter, that we have the old one and the new one, and then the à la carte ratification where states are permitted to select a certain types of rights. We have core rights that have to be accepted, but then the other ones, they can pick and choose. This is sort of the initial situation, but throughout time we have really been moving on towards that sort of convergence that you're speaking about. For example, we only have 8 countries of the 43 that still are bound by the old charter. All the other ones are bound by the modern revised charter. And we have a specific procedure, the Article 22 procedure, where we are negotiating with the states to accept new provisions, new articles, new rights of the charter. And this has been a fairly successful exercise. It's happening in every session. We have now, because of the pandemic, only written reports, but written exchanges, like with 2 countries, 3 countries, where they give us the information on the situation regarding the rights that are at stake, still need to be accepted. We give our opinion whether they can be accepted or not, and then sort of the negotiation starts. And for example, very recently, Bulgaria has indicated that it will accept quite a number of provisions. I think it's 11 or 12. So there is a constant progress towards this conversion, but it's true that we are still not there. So we have fairly few countries that have accepted all the provisions, that have accepted the collective complaints protocol, and the majority of states that are somewhere in between. The revised charter is accepted, but not the collective complaints procedure. So it's a process, but given how the system was set up, it's not an easy process, and it really takes time. And the second question, I think I forgot.
The role of the commissioner could play in case of strong violations and conclusion of non-conformity or whatever.
So the Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights is, I think, an excellent expert and very active and really pointing to the burning issues in the Council of Europe member states. And we've had, of course, also in the past, but also very recently, a very, very fruitful exchange on our mutual activities regarding the pandemic and how to preserve the right to health and other social rights, for example. And she's been, I think, imperative in voicing and positioning herself in showing that social rights have to be on top of the Council of Europe agenda, and there are a lot of problems that need to be resolved now, given that we are in this pandemic. So I appreciate very, very much her work and her collaboration with the committee with the common goal of fortifying social rights.
Yeah, that's a good question. Oh, you'd like to intervene?
Merci, Alan. Chers collègues, pour la première question, moi, je voudrais bien m'associer à ce que Karin vient de nous dire, mais pour la deuxième, je ne suis pas d'accord avec elle concernant le rôle que la Commissaire des droits de l'homme pourrait jouer en ce qui concerne la protection des droits sociaux. Non, personnellement, je ne vois pas comment la commissaire pourrait contribuer à la protection des droits sociaux, à part quelques déclarations théoriques en condamnant les violations des droits sociaux. Il faut qu'on soit réaliste en ce qui concerne le vrai poids de chacun de nos institutions ici au sein du Conseil de l'Europe. Moi, je parle en termes pratiques, en termes réels, en ce qui concerne la vraie place de chacun et en ce qui concerne sa vraie contribution à la protection des droits sociaux. Personnellement, je ne vois pas comment la commissaire pourrait contribuer à cette protection. Merci.
I read with really great interest the thematic report of the Commissioner for Human Rights on the right to health and the implication of it for the states of the Council of Europe. And I think this is the kind of work very much also on the ground work. I mean, she has her visits and her missions. She comes back from the countries. She has a lot of conversations with civil society organizations, state representatives, and so on. She has really the hands-on information. And she has been referring a lot to our jurisprudence and our interpretation of Article 11, the right to health and other social rights in view of the pandemic. And I think this has been a very, very fruitful work, and I'm sure this will continue also with other topics, because social rights are human rights.
Thank you very much, Karin. Would anyone else have a question? I don't think we have any questions online, so it is your human and social right not to ask any more questions. So if we come to the end of the road, then I think
we should also protect our... It's quite late, because exactly. We started working from 7 very early in the morning. So who should protect our own social rights also?
Yes, I agree, Ambassador. And so I think it's a good moment to thank you all for the participation. Of course, our distinguished panelists, Erhard and Ambassador, and also Karin, of course. And we wish all the best for the sale of the book, and hope for translations in multiple languages as soon as possible, or in coming years anyway. So thank you too to the Secretariat of the Social Charter for helping, and for the technician up there for doing a great job with the cameras and the sound. So I wish you all a good night, and have a safe journey home, and see you again sometime, I hope. Thank you very much to everyone. Bye.